Good morning, everybody. I'd like to call this meeting to order. And the adoption of meeting that the agenda for the Budget Committee meeting for September 17th, 2024 be adopted and circulated with the following amendment. That item 4 being a 2025 budget overview for agencies, boards, and committee by Ron Taylor, CEO. Can I have a motion to receive? Councillor Richardson, second. Councillor Joyce. Thank you. Declaration of community interest. Seeing none. And a motion for the adoption of the minutes of the previous meeting. Councillor Richardson, second by Councillor Joyce. No deputations, and we'll get right into presentations, and we'll start off with Ron Taylor, CEO.
Good morning, Chair, and thank you for the introductions. I'm just making sure I might have some technical difficulties already. I don't know if somebody will be able to move the slides through. Okay, well, I'll start, and if we can scroll them through, that's great. So thank you. Wanted to just provide some very brief introductory remarks with respect to the budget process for 2025, and then the topics of conversation for today and ongoing. And because many are sort of viewing parts and pieces of the process, it's always good to just remind where we started and where we're going. So essentially, your work kicked off early this month. There was some introductory information that was provided to you. You then had the Director of Corporate Services provide a broad overview of the 2025 draft operating budgets. You heard about capital budgets as well as our user rate water wastewater budgets. After that and ongoing, you will be hearing from all of the 9 operating departments throughout the city. I believe you've heard from about 4 so far, so you're about halfway there. Also today, starting today, you're going to hear from our ABCs, which are our agencies, our boards, and our committees. I'm not getting anything here. I just want to touch on briefly sort of what constitutes an ABC. Why they're in the budget and so on, and then we'll talk about others that aren't or out of scope for this particular review. So essentially, these agencies, boards, and committees, they're somewhat distinct from the general sort of core operations of the city. They typically have a separate governing body of some type, so a board of directors, maybe formal, maybe a registered organization. In other cases, just simply a board of directors. Typically, there's legislation that guides these ABCs in their structure and their business and service that they deliver. Traditionally, and no different this year and ongoing, there are a dozen that are in our annual budgets, and they are funded in whole or partially by Kawartha Lakes. So of the 12, you're going to hear today from 3. The Kawartha Lakes Halliburton Housing Corporation, the Kawartha Lakes Library, as well as the Kawartha Lakes Police Service. Later on in the week, you'll have your second meeting of 2 related to ABC's updates, and 2 others will be presenting there as well, being the Kawartha Region Conservation Authority, the largest of 4 conservation authorities that the city funds partially, and the Lindsay Downtown Business Improvement Area, the BIA, which is the only formal BIA in Kawartha Lakes. So I mentioned there's a dozen. Some you won't hear from in this venue, and I want to just clarify why. Very early on in the process, as you can appreciate, as soon as budgets are approved in year, we're already starting to work on the next cycle, and that is literally right away in the following quarter. So in Q1, we'll reach out to our partners, let them know what the funding and the expectations are of the city. We then also spell out our process for budget in the subsequent year. We send out letters. Those letters go out mid-year. I think in this case went out in July. And essentially it is asking all funded agencies, boards and committees to provide some draft budget information to the city, where they're trending and what things would look like in terms of a funding request for 2026. So actually we're up and running. Excellent. Okay. So before now we're going to go everywhere. Sorry. So I mentioned, before I jump then ahead on the process, I'll just sort of confirm the listing. I talked about the first few on this slide. The Haliburton, Kawartha, Pine Ridge District Health Unit, as well as the OPP. They are predominantly provincially funded, and so their fiscal years run on the provincial cycle to the end of March 31st of each calendar year. So there's a bit of a staggering in terms of when they would prepare their budgets and submit them here to the city. So they don't traditionally present in our budget process because we're quite early in the process. But when it is available and appropriate and they know the funding and the numbers, they will typically at minimum submit correspondence to the city and or do a presentation directly to council. And it's not different this year. We're looking at scheduling, at least for the health unit, very late this year. They're going through some structural conversations as well, so want to do a timely update to council when it's appropriate. The other groups, the Kawartha Lakes Healthcare Initiative, more of a community initiative in that particular case, but they are included in this listing because we do fund them annually in order to fund doctor recruitment and attraction efforts. Similarly, the Victoria Order of Nurses is a modest funding annually, and it's been traditionally funded for many years through the city budget. It's tracked through our Human Services Department, so they typically will just interact with that liaison department. And I think I touched on the others, so that rounds out all of the different agencies. So this is a budget summary. You would have seen this on September 12th. It was a summary by departments, and then the bottom line item talks about the summary of agencies, boards, and committees, all combined. So it shows the actuals for 2023, budget in 24, and now the proposed draft budget for 2025, and the change in that in those relative budgets. I mentioned the process, so we engage with our ABCs very early on in the process. We invite them to make presentations to the budget committee if sort of necessary and needed. In other cases, it'll be a broader presentation to the full council. And you saw the list previously, and I just want to make a distinction that what we don't include or what is not listed with our traditional ABCs are community donations, community group stakeholder donations. The distinction with those really being that they're a fixed time period for funding. Usually they're a one-time, 1 year, or they might be a very short period of time. And you have been, in the past, funding community groups like this that deliver services either directly on behalf of us or indirectly. It's a service that's expected in the community. So things like, or organizations like Ross Memorial Hospital, our art gallery locally, our community foundation, that's just naming a few. They will be separate and distinct as a line item or line items in the budget when it's finalized. They won't present at this venue with our traditional ABCs. They will, once you recommend a draft budget and it goes into the public realm, there will be a public meeting. And there is instruction to these groups that if they have a request to council for budget, then they should make it through that public-facing process. And they would do presentations at a public meeting that we have scheduled on November the 12th. And I think, Chair, I just wanted to sort of give some framework in terms of our partners out there. Again, you're going to hear from the 3 of 5. And if you have any questions generally about the process or the budgets for ABCs, happy to answer any questions now. Thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Taylor? Thank you very much for your presentation. And I need a motion to receive Councillor Joyce, Councillor Richardson, second it. Okay, thank you. Our first one today, our second one today is Kirsten Maxwell, the Kawartha Lakes Housing Corporation. If you want to come up.
Right, good morning. My name is Kirsten Maxwell, and I'm CEO of the Kawartha Lakes Haliburton Housing Corporation. With me this morning are Cheryl Faber, the Director of the Human Services Department, Don Quibel, Manager of Buildings and Properties with KLH, as well as Shelley Smith, our Manager of Tenant Services, Kendra Fleetwood, our Program Supervisor, and Jason Gillison, Capital Project Supervisor. First, Councillor Joyce, Councillor Richardson, Councillor McDonald, and Ron, Jane, city staff and residents, thank you for the opportunity to address you today. I also want to recognize the councillors who serve on KLH's board. Councillor Perry is our current acting chair after the unfortunate passing of Brent DeVolen. Also, Councillor Yeo and representing County Council, Bob Carter, the Mayor of Minden Hills. So I appreciate the time to address you today and tell you a little of KLH's story. I'm going to show you some dollar figures. And this is a budget presentation, but mostly I want to tell you a little bit about the story of KLH in 2024 and 2025. Next slide, please. So the agenda, go over the org chart, a little overview of KLH itself, story and discussion, some of our budget pressures. We'll review the budget summary, variance, and I'll finish with accomplishments and priorities for 2025. Next slide, please. So this is KLH's org chart for operations. Daily operations are the responsibility of the CEO role and our 29 full-time staff. Above the tenant services team, which includes office administrative staff as well as community housing workers who support tenants, and a compliance officer who deals with enforcement matters. The building and properties team maintain the buildings both on a daily basis and ensure their long-term viability and condition. All staff, including myself, are city employees with the Human Services Department, working closely with Human Services staff and under Cheryl Faber's direction. So next slide. Just a few basic facts about KLH. KLH is the City and County of Haliburton's local housing corporation as defined under the Housing Services Act. The units that were owned by the province in 2001, as well as the responsibility for operating and maintaining them, including a financial responsibility, were downloaded to municipalities at that time. Both the service manager oversight structure and the ownership and accountability structures were determined by the province. And then in 2016, KLH merged with Lindsay Nonprofit Housing to form KLH as we know it now. KLH is a separate corporation under the Business Corporations Act with an independent board of directors, as Ron told you, but the city is the sole shareholder and owner. There is an agreement with the County of Haliburton for the 124 units of KLH housing within the county. We are under the authority of the Housing Services Division as Housing Services Manager, with a significant portion of that authority dictated by provincial legislation, policies, and various funding program agreements. However, within these confines, Council's shareholder delegated responsibility for day-to-day operations to the KLH board, who in turn delegated that to the CEO. However, there are also other relationships between KLH and the city, as the city provides various services to us, including human resources, financial administration, IT systems and support, and so on. In 2024, with the addition of 46 new units in our 25 Hamilton Street project, less a few single and semi-detached homes were still in the process of selling to raise capital to support new builds. KLH now manages 819 homes in 27 different communities, from Omemee through Lindsay, Fenland Falls, Bobcaygeon, Minden, all the way to Haliburton. And the replacement value of our portfolio is $255 million. Over the last 11 years, KLH has increased the number of homes in our portfolio by 22%, which I think is unprecedented across Ontario at least. But the remainder of our stock is between 53 to 33 years old. And our mandate is to primarily be a landlord and provide lower cost housing for those who need it. But because some of our tenants have other needs as well, some fairly complex needs, and given our commitment to helping the city achieve housing goals, we do a lot more than just a landlord. Next slide, please. So at its September 4th meeting, KLH board approved the following resolution: that the draft operating and capital budgets presented in Report 2418, operating and capital budget, be received as the basis for continued budgeting processes. Next slide. So now I will tell you a bit about KLH's story and our current budget pressures. In my last two budget presentations, I spoke probably at too much length about the increased challenges KLH residents face and how the resulting increased workload of dealing with more problems and more complex problems continued to put a significant strain on all KLH staff. And I'm happy to report that there has been a marked improvement in the supports and services, as well as the collaboration between the many service providers working with our tenants, with significant positive impacts in the community. And a lot of that collaboration and that work is thanks to the efforts of Michelle Corley, the housing manager, and her team, particularly Erin Mulcaster, who worked with Michelle to set up community outreach services. Also Autumn Campbell of the paramedics and several external agencies. Now there are too many to mention, but at the beginning there was John Howard Society, Community Care, and the Ross Memorial Outreach team. And kudos also to new Chief Robertson and his increased collaboration with KLH and other agencies, as well as the great police work of the last year that I believe has significantly changed the character of our communities. The issues within our communities, of course, are far from solved, but they are improved. They're quieter, things are quieter than they have been in the last 3 years, and we're holding our breath, hoping it lasts. There are so many interrelated factors, it's really impossible to predict, however. But from KLH's perspective, the crises aren't as scary or as alarming or new, but they are still plentiful and demanding on staff, both frontline and management. And over the past year, getting the right staff with the right skill sets and mindsets into the right positions and supporting them to do great work has been challenging for KLH, as it has been for other employers. But I'm ecstatic to report that we are now only one position away from being fully staffed for the first time in my entire 3-year tenure here. We're excited about that. It will help immensely, but I don't believe it will get us fully out of crisis mode. We still need capacity, I think, to help dig the team out of a place of compounding negative impacts of an extended work overload on the team. Working over capacity for a long time isn't really a great strategy for efficiency, productivity, accuracy, or high quality work or good relationships, and creates significant stress or risks for the corporation. We are making really good headway on process improvements and improving efficiency, but it's still not quite enough. So we added new positions last year, We've only recently been able to fill the last of them, and they have already made quite a significant positive impact. And these are continuing to make up for essentially decades of underinvestment within the entire housing system in Ontario, as well as the 5 years of 0% subsidy increases, and as I mentioned, the increased workload for higher tenant needs. Our fourth community housing worker is in place now, and our team is hard at work supporting tenants, as well as updating processes and policies to meet the current challenges and the current needs, reaching out to community partners in new ways. And our new compliance officer has made significant progress with landlord and tenant board matters, with specific cases, and more broadly, even setting legal precedent at the board. And we're doing better ensuring that tenants have insurance, which reduces our liability, and improving our data capacity, and so much more. This year, as Ron noted yesterday, we are requesting 3 new positions. There is still significant work that we're not doing and need to be doing. Better and more efficient service, tracking and reporting, communication, both within the city organization, but also with all of our partners in the community and our tenants. Collaboration, community building within and without KLH's communities, and supervision and support for staff working in community is also a priority. And that's challenging given how broadly and the distance between our communities. And focus on training and peer support as well. But I want to assure you that we're doing our utmost to address the capacity change incrementally without overshooting the mark. The strategy is to increase the staff capacity to manage what we are doing now, and support the work of improving processes and becoming more efficient. Then with that efficiency, that will enable us to do the things that we're not doing but should be. So the 3 new positions that we requested this year, one, an administrative assistant, which will significantly increase efficiency, as right now the management team is doing far too much admin work, which is just clearly not efficient. Community safety officer is a position that other providers are doing as well, similar with some slight variations. And this is to take a long view to security and safety matters and reducing risk overall. It will also give us the ability to respond and produce, with the need for short-term increased security guard coverage. And increased communication and collaboration, as well as sort of long-term safety and emergency planning with KLH, but also working with tenants for their own safety and emergency planning. And finally, the supervisor for the community housing worker team to support and supervise staff in communities daily. Management staff to date, just there is so much else going on, so many corporate priorities and challenges that it is difficult for staff to spend much time in communities with frontline staff. Some other notable budget considerations. This budget includes $70,000 in one-time funding for specialized housing consultant services to support process improvements. We have been doing quite well, I think, with our process improvements, but it's slow and incremental. And if something happens with one position, then we're kind of offline and all focused on that, and the process improvement stops for a while. So this is to get us over the hill so we can start on the downward slide. The cost of providing security as well, this year there's no provincial offset, is set at $300,000. This is enough for one guard for nights only, to be shared among our communities as needed to address specific issues, as well as a few hours a night for a mobile guard to provide support and respond to emergencies. It does depend on things being somewhat quieter in our communities. We have at times needed much more significant security to deal with specific issues in our communities this year. So if things take a significant turn for the worse and we're back to significant safety concerns for staff and tenants, that probably won't be enough for intensive security services. But given the current situation, that's what we've landed on. Also note that we've added the 46 units of 25 Hamilton Street, which has increased the overall costs as well as increased the overall revenues. Budget pressure that will likely continue is that move-out costs continue to be quite high. They're not impacting this year's budget thanks to the CMHC repair program. We are able to use that to pay for a significant portion of move-out costs at the moment, and we are working hard to reduce move-out costs, including a lean project that Jason Gillison is undertaking as part of training with lean. But it is likely to be future budget pressure. Next slide, please. So here are the numbers. Overall revenue is fairly static when you are considering that we've added units. Overall rental revenue is up about 5%, but unfortunately that's not anywhere near where the cost increases are. Grants, KLH, the only grant we receive at the moment is from the federal government to pay off a very old debenture. As our long-term federal and provincial debt becomes due, this amount will continue to decrease year over year. Other revenues includes interest income, again decreasing as interest rates in the market are decreasing. In previous years, we had fairly significant funding from city housing, provincial funds that have been allocated to help offset security costs, but there are no longer funds available for that. User fees includes rental revenues. We also have, so we've done a very deep dive into our rental projections this year. So they're overall somewhat more conservative. We also don't have the same number of rents that are subsidized by other agencies such as CMHA and HHS, which in the past has contributed fairly significantly to our rental revenue bottom line. One thing that I want to highlight for you is that KLH is losing, and other housing providers in Ontario, are losing ground every year with costs relative to revenues because of the provincial legislation governing the housing system and how rent geared to income units that were transferred to municipalities in 2001 are funded and how their rents are mandated. So for 60% of KLH's units, tenants pay rent that is geared to their income, generally referred to as RGI, and there's no per unit rent subsidy. There are additional RGI units for which there is a direct subsidy paid to KLH, but I'm just going to highlight this one subset now. This creates real challenges when for 60% of our units, the rent doesn't go up unless the tenant's incomes increase. And on top of that, about 65% of those, the tenants are on social assistance. And that means we can only charge rent based on a scale that was set by the province again in 2001. So overall, that's somewhere over 50% of all of our units are set to very low rents and utility charges that were set by the province in 2001. And our costs continued to go up. So that essentially is a built-in download to municipalities from the province that just keeps giving year over year, a little bit more every year. Salaries, wages, and benefits line. Wages have been recorded through the city housing budget, but they've now been moved to KLH directly. So you'll see a change that have been added to interfunctional adjustments and removed from added to the salaries, wages, and benefits line and removed from elsewhere. We've made both, the city as well as we at KLH have done far more work in terms of analysis and budget this year. We're in a much better position with regard to data to facilitate and enable us to do that. So it has uncovered some things that that we are changing, and one of them is the movement of the salaries directly to KLH. And we've uncovered that some of the costs, the incidental costs, vacancy days, food allowances, were actually going to the housing budget. So that's inflating ours somewhat. Materials, training, and services include staff mileage and fleet cost. I noted the broad distance between our communities, so our fleet costs are not insubstantial. It also includes utilities, which again, were right-sized to our budget to the effect of about $120,000 this year. Next, contracted services includes the $70,000 for the one-time consultant to help with process review, security costs, and Aqua manages our 3 wells, and those costs have increased largely because the cost of chemicals were previously in capital budget, but now they're in operating, which is about a $50,000 impact. Also audit fees, legal fees, and so on. Rents and insurance, and not that kind of rent. So for us, this is just the insurance premium, which has increased, the additional units of 25 Hamilton Street. And I just want to note, insurance is still a very big risk for housing providers across Ontario. But KLH is in quite good shape because once Intact withdrew from the whole insuring housing providers at all, KLH went with cooperators, which has been really positive for us in a number of ways. One of them is that they have a special product for nonprofits, which caps premium increase at 5% a year, which helps with budgeting very much. And that's save and except for increase in property values, but that's been very helpful. Their liability coverage has also facilitated more support services in our communities for tenants, as we're able to be more flexible with other small agencies on insurance. We are a target for lawsuits, and triggering a claim for us is a huge issue. So we're able to talk with the insurance company and ask questions without it automatically triggering a claim, which has been extremely helpful. But that's also, the risk is also an increase in our building and maintenance budget because we are extremely cautious about putting things through claim and pay for a lot of the, some of the significant unit repair costs if the tenant doesn't have insurance through that maintenance and building budget. Interest on long-term debt, it's not a high amount there, but as I said, the old debt is gradually coming to an end, as is the federal funding that we received to offset the principal. KLH's debt under debt, lease, and financial from devolution has decreased significantly. You'll see there were higher amounts in 2022 and 2023. Interfunctional adjustments, again, there has been an increase in our subsidy request from 2024, approximately $1 million. And this line also includes debenture payments. We will be shortly taking up financing for 25 Hamilton, as well as the Murray Street project in Fenelon Falls, which has recently started construction, is on the horizon for financing as well. However, we have been working with CMHC, and our expectation is that they will be providing forgivable, fairly significant forgivable loan for both of those projects, which reduces the mortgage requirements or mortgage needs. And CMHC interest rates are a good 1% lower than typical. That also includes internal charges, property taxes, which are about $40,000 higher, and so on. And finally, the transfers to reserve, the 119 you see this year is simply interest on our investments, which will be moved to capital reserves. In previous years, we have done an industry standard 4% of rent revenues, savings to our capital replacement reserve. We have not done that this year to save on the subsidy request. And the CMHC repair program essentially has enabled us to do that, as you know, we're confident now that we're going to have all of the immediate repairs for the next several years done through that program. Next slide, please. So this slide just gives you a closer look at all of the variances that I noted already, with specifics in the amount of the variance. Give you a minute with that, and I'll start in on our accomplishments and priorities for 2025. For me, the biggest sense of accomplishment that always makes me want to give a big cheer when I am standing up here every year is that we survived another year, and without a major catastrophe. And I think that's reason to celebrate. We haven't had a building burn down. Other housing providers have. We did have a fire and no one was injured. We've not had any staff have a major physical injury, be assaulted. No management staff have left or gone on leave. And any number of other disasters have been prevented and averted. And I think that's a big reason to celebrate. We are also mourning the loss of our former chair, Brent DeVolen, who passed away earlier this year. And his shoes are going to be difficult to fill. And we very much missed his vision and his clear thinking and his decisiveness on the board. We've also made significant progress on our long-term staffing plans. New positions, realignment of positions, training, staff development, succession planning. We're not there yet, but we're well on our way and have made a lot of progress. This includes realignment and refresh of the community housing worker team, refining, clarifying, and increasing the documentation of roles and responsibilities and so on. And as I said, we've completed construction of 25 Hamilton Street with 46 new units. 21 of those will be at RGI rents, 15 at market, and the building's now more than half occupied. If you haven't seen it, give Dawn a call and go have a look. It's really well done. It's quite beautiful. As I said, the Murray Street project in Fenelon Falls is under construction, and we're also optimistic for CMHC support. CMHC's program will provide up to $75,000 per unit, all units in the project, depending on the energy efficiency, accessibility, and affordability standards. And all of our projects qualify for that. That has made a complete difference in the viability of development. So we've also found with that project, construction costs came in less than projected, which is really great news. So we're really quite optimistic with those CMHC, the reduced construction costs and interest rates decreasing, making development much more viable than it has been in the last couple of years. And I've noted the CMHC repair program. The building and property team are halfway through a 3-year program, major repair program, doing 6+ years of major repairs and replacement within 3 years. The projects overall are increasing energy efficiency and accessibility, extending the lifespan of the buildings themselves, as well as the different building systems, and supporting operations and tenant service as well. Just a couple of example projects. Generators for all of our buildings is one large project that's still underway, and that's becoming increasingly important with obviously the increased storms and power outages, accessibility with elevators, but especially our 3 communities on well water, and the wells don't pump very well without power. New accessible playground up north, and we're still having elevators assessed, but our buildings are going to be in excellent shape for years to come thanks to that program. So our priorities for 2025, continuing those process improvements, creating efficiencies, our data and reporting capacity, The in-community staff support and supervision I've mentioned. We've staff in Haliburton every day. It's hard to be there with them and to have a good sense of what's happening on the ground in our communities every day. And reducing move-out cost, as I've already noted. Well, thank you for your time today and welcome any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Joyce.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. That's a lot to take in, but thank you for the presentation, CEO Maxwell. I recognize overcapacity of the team can lead to burnout, and that probably leads to a lot of days off, right? Am I correct in that?
I don't think we've had many days off or leaves, but it certainly reduced productivity. And yes, I believe overall more illness and.
No, I recognize that, where additional staff can really help mitigate that. So I just want to say I recognize that. So I am struggling with the $300,000 for a community safety officer. I hire security guards too for my side business. And it's $26 an hour and 12 hours a day for 365 days a year is $115,000. So how do you get the $300,000 for a nighttime security guard?
I can send you the detailed numbers. For us, it's higher than 26 an hour, but not dramatically so. I believe the mobile guard, Shelley, correct me if I'm wrong here, is about 36 an hour for the time that they're on. That provides backup to the nights. The nights we're doing 12-hour shifts, and there is also supervisor who provides occasional support. I'll have to get back to you on some of the details on that. I appreciate the question.
No worries. It just seemed a bit high, but is the mobile every night as well, or is it more?
It is, but it is not for full 12 hours. Yeah.
That's fair. Thank you. Yeah. Reducing move-out costs. I have a bit of familiarity with that too. My brother is the repair guy for a very similar organization in British Columbia, and unfortunately he's kept pretty busy. I recognize the problem, but I don't know what kind of solution you would have there. It's how would you manage to reduce it? I think it just is.
We've been trying to do more of the work in-house. The volume, that just isn't possible, and we would need far too many staff to do that. We're doing some simple things like new cabinet doors. First, we've switched to all white cabinets so that it's easier to replace. We don't have to worry about matching wood colors. And the guys are building new doors out of big sheets of melamine. I think some of it's efficiency in communication as well, doing it more quickly so that we're able to turn units over faster and get people in the units and paying rent sooner. Don, any other? Jason, anything else?
The biggest item would be to bring more of the repair costs in-house, have our staff working on the units. But right now,
and working, I think, collaboration between the teams as well, the community housing workers and Don and Jason, talking with tenants before they move out about things that they could be doing to reduce what we will charge them afterwards. For some, that won't make much difference, but for others, if they can clean things out, it is less cost to us.
Oh, the all white covers. That's smart. That's the innovation. That's the smart way. Can we turn to page 7?
Cheryl, did you want to jump in on that before we go to 7?
I was just going to say to Councillor Joyce, the other thing we're doing with Murray Street, and as we build new units, we are hardening the surfaces of everything we build. So we learned a lot from 68 Lindsay Street around sizes, cabinetry, wall coverings, all that type of thing. So as we look at Murray Street and beyond, we're hardening the walls, the spaces, and everything like that. So instead of drywall, it's drywall with a sheet of plywood behind it. Correct, Don? Yeah, so instead of, we're not doing brick walls yet, but that's where we are to try and save costs.
Understood, thank you. Yeah, if you could possibly resubmit the slide deck with grand totals, would be great.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
the interfunctional adjustments, the difference between 2024 and 2025 is not 3,089,000. The variance, I don't understand the variance there. Maybe I missed something.
I'll just provide a bit of context there for the CAO through you, Mr. Chair. The wages previously were charged to the city's books in Fund 1, so you will now see $3 million reflected directly in KLHHC, which is a separate fund in the city's books. So now all of the wages are directly on KLH, so the $3,051,000 on the top line salaries is equally an offset in part. There's other things in interfunctional. So as opposed to the city putting the wages in Fund 1 and charging it to Fund 8, they're just now directly in Fund 8. The other items in interfunctional are the charge to the city for some of those interfunctional. The city pays KLH to run their organization. There's some other minor internal charges. There's the city property tax and principal and interest. So the offset between the 3,051 on your wages is almost 100% offset in the interfunctional reduction of $3 million. Does that help?
Thank you, Director Bukubu. As usual, you have the answers to the questions. Thank you. That's all I have. Thank you.
Councillor Richardson.
Through you, Chair. Councillor Joyce took all my questions. No, I'm just kidding. Obviously, those are the ones that flagged to me as well. And thank you to your team, because we certainly recognize the challenges that you folks have, and we absolutely admire your determination and tenacity that you have representing our community as well. And I think a big success story is that 22% more units, which, as you said, is unheard of in other municipalities. And I, too, am just like Councillor Joyce, looking to see that optically, that grand total at the end just helps us balance it out when we're looking at it. So just one quick question regarding that security issue. Is this a contracted service, or these are permanent positions within the city?
Actually, both this year. The $300,000 is for contracted services, and plus there is an additional position we're calling community safety officer. The hopes of taking a longer term view, more proactive, being more preventive, and working with tenants on reporting to police their own safety planning and their own behaviors, not letting people in the building and so on. So said that's a position or similar positions that many other providers are moving to. So we'll see how it goes, and the hope is that that will enable us to reduce the contracted services more. But I will say the contracted services have been really great. They've prevented even some maintenance issues. Having people in the communities at night noticed a flood that didn't end up becoming much worse. And we've found that tenants are too afraid to report things to police. It will come back to them, and it's just not a safe plan for tenants. But the security are there, they have access to cameras, and they have, they report everything to police and are able to provide quite a bit of evidence, both to police to develop a case, but also to KLH to deal with any enforcement actions through the landlord-tenant board. So there are multiple benefits from security.
That is a fulsome description of this new position, so thank you for that. And it really does make a lot of sense when you look at the end game of saving money in the long run. No, I'm the same. Again, thank you. It's a great presentation.
Thank you, and I'll pass on your thoughts to the team. They always appreciate knowing that their work is recognized and appreciated.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions there. Just 25 Hamilton Street, beautiful building. You have 3 different types of rent. Does that come to a break even or make money with the 3 types of rent? How does that go?
With Hamilton Street and the 15 market units, that the building cost itself and the rent revenues end up being positive. That doesn't include the centralized administrative costs, but in terms of the property cost, for maintaining the building, the mortgage, and so on, that's all more than a break even. I think it's like $150,000 to the good.
That's a good story. And then I noticed the 3 staff that you're hiring to go back on doing the maintenance yourself. Is that going to help these 3 staff to be able to have your people do more repairs? Like, where does that go in? Because if we can save money by doing our own repairs, I don't see how any of that staff would help maintain more.
You are correct. Last year's staffing request included more maintenance staff. This year's does not. The direct link between this year's staff and maintenance would be primarily the supervisor being able to work with the housing workers within the communities and supporting tenants. And the more people we have in the communities recognizing issues and being able to work with tenants up front to deal with hoarding and other issues over long-term can help reduce the maintenance costs. But you are correct, there isn't anything directly.
All right, thank you. And again, thank you for your presentation today, and to all your staff, the hard work you do. I know it's very challenging, but keep up the good work. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And could I have a motion to receive the report? Councillor Richardson, second by Councillor Joyce. Thank you very much. Let's take 15 minutes to bring in the next group, and the other first group can go. Thanks. Okay, thank you. We'll start up again here. 4.2 is Kawartha Lakes Public Library. You got Jamie Anderson. Welcome.
Thank you, Council and councilors. I'm just going to see if this works. Oh, yes, it does. Good. Okay. Hello, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Jamie Anderson, the CEO Library Director for the Kawartha Lakes Public Library. While I'm speaking to you by myself up here, I do want to acknowledge Carolyn Danes. So while she's the city treasurer, she's also the library's treasurer. As well, our manager of public services and programming, Marika Junkin, is in the gallery today. Quick overview of the agenda. We'll do a kind of a library overview, our accomplishments for 2024. I'll talk briefly about the Valuing Ontario Libraries Toolkit that we participated in earlier this year, as well as our 2025 priorities, and that'll lead into the 2025 budget request. There's a couple of photographs from library events. On the left is a young space explorer in our space immersion event that we had this summer. And then on the right, a couple of young library users riding the KLPS ATV with Constable Walden. We have 14 branches throughout the city. We are open 350 hours each week to the public. That is approximately 18,200 hours of public access to our buildings each year. We have 12 full-time staff and 36 part-time staff for an full-time equivalency of 29.5. In 2023, we welcomed about 190,000 visitors to our branches. That was an increase of about 20% over the 2022's numbers. We are almost back to pre-COVID numbers for in-person visits. Our virtual visitors also up about 20% over 2022 at 495,000, so just a hair under 500,000 virtual visitors. Overall, 685,000 interactions with library users last year. Quick overview of our organizational structure. We are quite a thin, lean team. As I mentioned, we have 29.5 full-time equivalent employees spread over the 14 branches. Some of our 2024 accomplishments, Coboconk Library branch renovations as well as the service center. That facility reopened to the public in early July of this year. Lindsay Library branch renovations have also been finished, and we reopened that facility actually yesterday. The children's department still has some work to be done, but the building itself is open to the public and the adult collection is available to borrow. We've been able to expand the Bob Cajun Library branch hours. That facility is now open 8:30 in the morning, Monday through Friday, plus Saturdays from 10 until 3. We've continued to expand our library of things. This year we've added a home movie theater kit. We'll be adding radon detectors coming in October, and we've expanded our community passes in partnership with Parks and Recreation for swimming and skating passes. We've launched LibStaffer scheduling software. This will save us hundreds of staff hours each year in maintaining and in creating and developing and our staffing schedules, as well as looking after payroll with it. And again, we're on track for our best year of attendance at library events. Couple more photographs. Everyone loves photographs of kids. On the left, we have a story time at the Lindsay branch. And on the right are 3 astronauts and a cardboard rocket ship that they made this summer. Space exploration was the theme for our summer reading club this year, and seemed to have gone off well, better than the Boeing rocket ship that went into space recently. So I'm going to quickly talk about the valuing of Ontario Libraries Toolkit, also known as VOLT. We participated in this year. We developed our numbers in the spring using 2023's numbers. VOLT was developed by the Ontario Library Service, which is part of the Ministry of Tourism, Culture and Gaming, along with Algoma University. The Valuing Ontario Libraries Toolkit is designed to help Ontario public libraries measure and demonstrate their value and social impact within the community. Public libraries are important cultural and social infrastructures in our communities. We are often the only institution that provides a broad array of critical supports to our communities, including education, culture, inclusion, reconciliation, and civic engagement. Unlike other gathering places in the community, public libraries are a space for everyone, where nothing is expected of us other than respect for one another. In serving this inclusive role, public libraries are often the backbone of our communities and towns. The framework demonstrates that libraries are cultural and social infrastructures that create individual, organizational, and community benefit in several areas. Each of these areas has a unique role in the social return on investment, SROI, value. The social return on investment, SROI, calculations take something that is offered at no charge, a library service, events, programs, classes, and applies a dollar value to it. The SROI has been designed by economists to represent the value of an organization or an initiative that provides monetary estimates, dollar values, to the community benefit that are created by events, tools, programs, and services that don't typically have a monetary value. This year, the toolkit found that for every municipal dollar invested in the library in 2023, the social return on investment was $6.21, with a total economic benefit of $13,152,000. This is broken down over several areas or domains, as they're referred to in the toolkit. Education had an economic benefit of $1.6 million. Culture, $218,000. Inclusion and well-being, just a hair under $250,000. Entertainment and leisure, $8.5 million. Direct local economic benefit of $2.19 million. Civic engagement of just under $9,000. And the space itself, the library space itself, had a benefit of $353,000. This works out to approximately $166 per permanent resident, or $402 of benefit per household in the city. For every library hour that we are open to the public, the Kawartha Lakes Public Library generates $313 of economic benefit. The toolkit's designed, it doesn't really allow us to compare ourselves to other systems, but it allows us to compare ourselves to ourselves over time. The weighting of the values depend on the size of the population, the number of the libraries and communities that we serve, as well as even the proximity to the GTA. The further you are away from a large urban center, the more important things like books on a library shelf become, and more valuable, so to speak. All right, a few more photographs. On the left is a child participating in a story walk at the Ken Reid Conservation Area. The story walks, especially at Ken Reid, have been very, very popular. We used to have a kind of a month off between one story walk and another, and now we actually have to replace them right away when we do a new one, or we get people calling to ask if they've been taken down. On the right is a little girl who attended a program in the spring, and she received some sunflower seeds to plant in her garden, and that is the result. She was very excited about her farming this year. Briefly talk about library programming. Our events and classes are highly valued by the residents of Kawartha Lakes. The library events and programs provide free and accessible learning and entertainment to everyone in our community, built around the wants and needs of people in our city. Library events and classes connect people to the community. We continue to see growth in attendance of library events. We've grown per capita. In 2014, about 18% of the city's population would have attended a library program. That's grown in 2019 to about 31%, in 2022 to about 36%, in 2023 to 65%, and we are on target for this year to have a per capita, residents per capita attending a library program being 75%. There's the Lindsay, the Carnegie wing of the Lindsay Library. So let's move on to the 2025 priorities. We are planning to launch a growth master plan next year. This will be funded out of current capital reserves. We also plan on beginning our strategic planning for our next strategic plan. The current one ends at the end of next year, and we would like to have a new one in place for January 2026, so we'll do the planning itself at the end of 2025. That'll be funded out of library reserves. We also hope to start the Fenelon Falls Library branch expansion, as well as the accessibility improvements at the Bethany Library branch will hopefully start in spring of 2025. All right. On to the budget itself. Our expected revenues for 2025 remain the same as 2024 at $272,533. Revenues are broken down into three broad categories. Grants, includes our provincial operating grant of about $174,000, as well as funds from developmental charges and donations. The public library operating grant, the $174,000 rate, has remained the same since the mid-1990s, and it is the only direct provincial funding the library receives. Photocopying is just that. This is revenues generated from photocopying, printing, things like that. And then user fees, that is things like book replacement, research fees, and room rentals. So overall, we expect those revenues to remain the same at $272,533. Expenditures. I just want to stress that this is not adding anything new to our services or our staffing levels. This is a strictly inflationary increases. Overall, our expenditures, we're looking at an 8.5% increase to our expenditures budget in 2025. As I mentioned, it's entirely due to inflationary increases and contractual agreements. Our wages will be the largest portion of that. Over 70% of our budget is wages and benefits related. Library staff are city staff. We are expecting to see an increase of about $213,000 in wages for 2025. This is about a 10.8% increase over the 2022 wages budget. Outside of wages and benefits, we are looking at an overall, sorry, I shouldn't say overall, looking at a 2.9% increase to expenditures for everything else, so library operations, telecommunications, which is internet and telephones, collections and library supplies, so that's our books on the shelf, rents, electronic resources, and computer hardware. Overall, in 2025, we are looking at an increase to our expenditures budget of $235,337. This is an overall increase in expenditures of 8.58%. The total expenditures budget will rise in 2025 to $2,978,719. So just a kind of a brief overview of the budget request itself. For the last 4 budget cycles, the library has used reserve funds to offset inflationary increases that are outside of wages and new positions. This has been compounded annually and is no longer sustainable. For 2024, we are keeping the library budget artificially lower by accessing up to $130,000 from library reserves. As mentioned, revenues are expected to remain the same in 2025 at $272,533. Expenditures are expected to rise by $235,337 to $2,978,719. Typically, our net budget request is quite simply expenditures less revenues. In 2024, that would have meant, without accessing the library reserves, our library budget request would have been $2.47 million, not the requested $2.34 million, as you can see. Because it is no longer sustainable to keep the library budget request artificially low, we are looking at an increase of our net budget request for 2025 of $365,730. This is an increase of 15.6% over our 2024 net budget, and our net budget request for 2025 is $2,706,186. I just want to mention, library reserves were just made up of funds left over from that budget year. So the majority of our reserves right now comes from staff gapping in 2020 and 2021 when we were closed and had to reduce staff due to COVID. So I will just finish it off there with a photograph of Touch a Fire truck in Dalton from this summer. Let's see if there's any questions.
Any questions? Go ahead, Councillor Joyce.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. First, if you could turn to page 11. So I'm an unabashed supporter of the library, and it cannot be understated the health of a good library system, the value to the community, and that chart there is a really good news story. So I thank you and team for that. Well, that doesn't mean I don't keep my pencil sharpened either. So if you can turn to, I think it was page 14. And it's mostly a question, I think, for Director Bukaboom. In that, sorry, no, not 14, it's the budget slide, sorry, I got mixed up.
Expenditures?
Yes, thank you. We know of, certain salary increases that have been agreed upon, but the change in wages and benefits, if I did my math correctly, is about a little over 9%. How do we get there? I'm trying to wrap my head around. There's no increase in staff, everything's the same there, but how that change in budget expenditures, if that could be fleshed out for me.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor, and to support what the Chief Librarian was indicating. The status quo budget before you involves wages, salaries, and benefits for the current staff model in that org chart. Included in salaries expenses in our budgets for 2025, you had a few contract negotiation ratifications in there. There were some market adjustments that have been allocated for non-union, and there are other benefit increases. So just holding the line without any new staff is deriving a cost and a pressure to the 2025 budget.
Okay, and that all adds up to almost 10% in increase in wages, yeah. I asked the same question because I'm on the committee, and we wrestled with that one, so I just had to ask it again.
Yeah, essentially, I think the easiest way to think about it is the wages actually that are indicated for 2024 are actually based on the 2023 pay rate. So the 2025 recommended budget actually contains both 2024's increase for the QP, just concluded QP negotiations, as well as the 2025 negotiations.
Thank you, CEO Anderson. Appreciate that.
Councillor Richardson.
Thank you, Chair. Through you. On page 16, you made a statement regarding it's not sustainable to continue to use transfer from reserves. What is the current balance in the reserve for this department?
As of January 1st, we were about $850,000. I expect that to be down to about $650,000 by the end of this year. If we were to continue with compounding, we would be hitting probably $150,000 from reserves, pulling from reserves for 2025. That would probably go up to another $175,000 to $200,000. That also doesn't include any use of reserve funds for any sort of kind of replacement of library shelving, things like that. Beautiful, upgrading, renovations, not renovations, sorry, kind of cosmetic changes to the library branches themselves. So.
Thank you very much for that, and also thank you to you and your staff for the continued exposure you have in our communities. I know even in my ward how frequently our library is used by a lot of younger families as well. So I recognize the challenges you have, and we do have those contractual obligations, and that's about all I can say right now. Thank you.
I had one question there. The best of my knowledge, the art gallery will be moving.
Yes.
Is that going to create, definitely more space for you, but he's going to need more staff for that?
I'm hoping initially we'll be moving in sometime in this fall. There will probably need to be a kind of a redistribution of the current Lindsay staff, and then that'll lead into the 2026 budget request, whether we need to actually add additional staff to that side. We are hoping to make that side kind of a ongoing maker space. We'll work with, sorry, I can't remember Pingwa's new name. So make sure we're not duplicating any services that they're already offering, but we'll have a kind of a maker space set up there as well.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for your team for all the hard work you do, and thank you for your presentation. Could I have a motion to receive the Kawartha Lakes Public Library budget? Councillor Richardson, second by Councillor Joyce. Thank you, and we'll just take maybe just a quick 5 minutes just to get the next group up here for their presentation. Thank you. Okay, I'd like to call the meeting back to order. And up next, 4.3 is we've got the Kawartha Lakes Police Service budget. Police Chief Kirk Robinson, go ahead, and thanks for coming.
Morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'd like to thank everyone here for giving me the opportunity to come speak today. Before I get started, I'd like to acknowledge two people who are here today. Wanda Percival, who is the chair of the Police Services Board, as well as Executive Assistant Leah Ray. Both Leah and Wanda and the rest of my senior team and the board had significant input into this, and I'm just privileged to be here today as their representative to present it. Today, we're going to go over some of the pressure points that we have and some of the increases that we're looking for, and I'm going to talk to you about some staffing increases that I believe are required. But when we look at this, I'll ask you to keep in mind as we go along, we're not looking to increase any of our senior people, our senior management. These are more boots on the ground so we can provide an increased service to representatives or to the people of our community, as well as some equipment replacement. We have some aging equipment that unfortunately is coming to end of life and is going to need to be replaced, and as well just some of the impacts that deferring any of these items may have. So the first staffing increase we'll look at is our Director of IT is currently one of our senior executives at Kawartha Lakes Police Service. This person is retiring, so I took the opportunity to look at the functions and the responsibilities that she has, and she is in charge of, the Director of IT is in charge of our IT department, all of our communication section, and all of our records management section, including answering all Freedom of Information Act requests. She processes all of those things. She has about 17 people that report directly to her. So I would like to divide that position into two separate roles. One will be the supervisor in charge of the communication center, and one will be the supervisor in charge of the records department, and that will encompass the Freedom of Information Act and our IT department as well. What that will do for us, it will allow the people that take over those roles the opportunity to provide enhanced services, but also some quality control, implement some quality control measures that the one staff member just doesn't have the time to do right now. It's just not within her day. She probably worked 14 or 15 hours a day and still not be able to get to all of those things. So by splitting those, I think we'll be able to provide a little bit better service, not only internally, but to our external customers as well. And we had a staffing analysis completed in 2020, which supported just this move. It said that her span of control was too large. So by, again, just following up on that, this was the opportunity. This person was retiring, so it gave us the opportunity to have a good look at it and say, okay, let's see how we can make things run a little more efficiently. And this person will not be part of our senior command team. They will be part of a more operational they'll have a more operational position, and again, we'll improve some quality control in both areas as well. The second one will be new for us. We do have special constables now. We use them primarily at the courts. I'm looking for 4 special constables, which would give us the opportunity to add 1 per platoon. And by doing that, they can take on a lot of administrative functions that we pay police officers to do right now that don't need to be done by police officers, but we don't have other choice at the moment. Some of those, we have bail court. For those who don't know, bail court runs out of the police station virtually Tuesdays, Thursdays, and on the weekends. And if we don't have the ability to bring special constables down from court because of their duties up there, we have to have a police officer come off the road from their regular road duties to look after those functions. The risk reduction, it comes into effect when we have prisoners in our cells overnight. We currently have civilian prisoner monitors who come in, but their functions are very limited. They go down, they check on the person and make sure they're physically okay, and then they record that they've checked on them. Should something happen, they're not able to enter the cell to assist the people. They don't have the training to do that, and so they then have to call an officer to come back from the out on the road, wherever they may be. If they're tied up on a call, it may have to wait. Special constables would have the ability, just like court officers, to engage with the person if they're in medical distress and start providing some aid to them. And they can also move the people around. There are some administrative functions that have to be undertaken when someone's in custody, as far as fingerprinting or getting them, facilitating their calls to their lawyers, which the special constables could do, which would then again remove the need for a police officer to come back and do that. There's many other things. I could go on with the number of duties that they can do, from traffic direction to assisting with guarding prisoners who end up at the hospital. Instead of having 2 police officers, we could have 1 police officer, 1 special constable. And it's also a good recruiting program for us. As you've probably heard over the last couple of days of your budget presentations, this community is growing, and we are going to need to grow as well. So this is a great opportunity for us to see who some of these people are in this setting before we just make a decision and move them on to become police officers. We have had great success with this. I think currently we have 4 police officers who are previously serving special constables with us, so, and they are functioning very well. So it is something that's not new or unique to Kawartha Lakes. Many other jurisdictions use special constables in the relation instead of having police officers do some of these roles. And I'd like 2 new police constables. This just continues with what has happened previously in 2022. We started with a bit of growth as approved by the board and ultimately through the budget process to increase our numbers. And by hiring 2 more police constables, that would give us the ability to increase our platoon strength. So that is the frontline officers in uniform to 7 officers on every shift. And as you'll notice there in the last line, the platoon numbers haven't grown since 2001. And I'll just ask you to keep that in mind as we move forward. This is just for StatsCan showing where we are. The most current and up-to-date numbers on StatsCan are from 2022 for Ontario and for Canada. But they do have ours when they break it out. We're at 144 officers per 100,000. The average across Ontario is 173. But here's our call for service, and this is what I think is very interesting. In 2002, we had 8,800 calls roughly, and we had 5 constables, 1 sergeant on every shift. And as you see the fluctuation in calls as we go along, 2021 we've always internally referred to as a bit of an anomaly for us, but we're getting close to that again. As you can see, we're over the 16,000 mark in 2023. Currently, we're at 11,600 calls for service this year, which is 1,000 calls for service more than this time last year. So we are getting busier. And the work that's involved with these calls is significant as well. There's 22 years ago in 2002, a call that might have taken 2 or 3 hours for an officer is now, because of court demands and some other administrative functions, could be taking them 3 or 4 or 5 hours. So it is busy, and there are more administrative tasks on officers as far as property management and digital evidence that comes in, as well as body-worn cameras. So our calls for trending higher, and we're doing it with the same amount of staff that we've had for the last 22 years as far as our frontline staffing goes. Population changes. So this came from these numbers from Dr. Found, and it is a significant increase in our population, and I know you've heard as recently as yesterday about the housing starts that are expected to over the next 5 years. That I recall hearing that those starts may double or even more over the next 5 years, and I think just with what I'm looking at right now is allowing me to catch up to where we need to be right now. We will have to have a look at some things to make a plan for the future. I don't think necessarily does having an increased population. If the population will say doubled, just as a number, I don't have to double the size of the police service. It would all be related to our calls for service, and we would have to build that in. But we are, the officers are very busy. They are, when they are at the work, they are either out on the road answering calls or they are in doing their administrative tasks, which have increased significantly over the last 20 years. It's very demanding on them. So, and then some of the equipment replacement, we purchased our current portable radios that we use in 2009. They are at end of life. We've probably, I would estimate we've got at least 7 to 10 years out of them more than what we probably would with anything new. And one of the components is the microphone you see the officers will wear up on their shoulder, has an emergency button on it as well. They no longer make them. And I believe you had some discussions last year about technology not being supported by manufacturers, and that's the same with these radios. We cannot get the components that we need in order to use them. And so to get out safe equipment for the officers to use, we need to replace them. So we did, through the board, approved a purchase of 8 units last year because we were getting low on radios to be able to provide one for every officer if we had a major call out. So we did replace some last year, and this will just be the remaining purchase of the rest of them. And with the portable radios and some of the equipment that's required for the radio towers, we have 2 towers to allow them to talk back and forth. It's over about $230,000 for that equipment. So, and then some further equipment replacement. The desks that are in our communication center we purchased in 2011. They are very specialized desks that allow there are some comfort features to it, but they're sit stand that accommodate all of the monitors that are used and all the other equipment that is on the desk. They are as well nearing end of life, starting to fail. One of the desks actually broke, and we had the company that supplied it in to give us a cost to fix it, and it was $18,000 just to fix that desk to bring it back to where it functions. And when we purchased them, 2 of the workstations had all of the features. One didn't because we didn't use it. It was just at a time when our calls for service didn't dictate it. We now in our communication center have 2 full-time dispatchers, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We have 1 dispatcher who works through the week for 8 hours at the 3rd station, and on the weekends we have 4 hours of coverage for lunch. So the full communication center is now being used. And as I said, 24/7, 365, and there's different people with different settings, and they're moving them around, and they are 13, 14 years old at this point. We purchased those, just for reference for you, we purchased those desks in 2011 for about $39,000. The current replacement cost on those is, for the same setup, is $106,000. And that inflation rate has been that much. So it's, and those desks that are used are pretty much the standard that are used across communication centers in the province. When we speak with police officers or leaders in other organizations, are the same desk. Some go a little more extreme with some of their functions, but that's this one here is kind of in the middle of the road for us. And contingency reserve, historically, we've reduced our budget a few $100,000 every year. Over the last 4 years, we've averaged $285,000 to apply to our budget. This year, we don't have the funds in our contingency reserve because of some of the previous, some expenses we've had over the last couple of years. We've depleted them down, and we don't have any to apply to this year's budget. So I won't be able to do that. This is what you're seeing is our costs for operating. So impacts of deferring. Well, staff burnout and increased sick time. Our people are doing a lot of extra work because of just the job has changed, and they're getting to the point where they are expressing regularly how taxed they feel with the duties they have to perform. And when we do have someone who's off sick, as you well know, someone's off sick, then one of those people who's already a little overburdened has to come in so that we can provide the service to our community, and they're picking up the extra shifts. And then, so they're taking on extra duties. So it is something that if we defer, we run the risk of having more people in that cycle of burning out, and I don't want to see that happen. Recruiting and retention, well, like many sectors, police officers talk, and they talk about what's good and what's bad, and for our experienced officer recruiting program, we rely heavily on the folks that we have in our organization to be ambassadors for us when they're talking to colleagues. Many of our officers have come from other organizations, and we want them to be able to tell their colleagues when they're looking that this is a great place to work, and which I believe it is, and we are certainly very well supported within our community and with the board, but we want to be able to maintain that. And on a retention side, I don't want to see my folks get to a point where they're feeling that they're burnt out or undervalued and start to look to go to other places. So that would be that's a big portion for my staffing issue. And if we do have a total failure of our equipment, then we don't have sufficient reserves at this time to replace any of them. So then we would have to I guess come back to you to say we're going to need some money to help us out here. But we are at a point where the radios are failing regularly, and we can't get replacement parts, as well as I've already explained to you about the communications desk. So just a little more inflationary information for you to see where we are with some of our expenses. In 2022, we could buy a police interceptor model Ford Explorer for $46,000. In 2024, the most recent one we ordered was $58,000. That's just to buy the vehicle. That doesn't include any of the equipment that comes with it, the lights. And Ford very graciously, and I'm sure it's other manufacturers, so I won't pick on Ford, I don't want to make any enemies, but by the time we cycle a vehicle out, the body styles have changed, something has changed in them, so the cages don't fit, the computer mounts don't fit. So we're looking pretty much completely upfitting a vehicle, and it's between $75,000 and $80,000 now by the time you purchase a vehicle, buy the new equipment, and get it installed and the striping and everything. So, and that's just circumstances beyond our control that the pricing has changed that drastically for us. And just a few other things. You can see there on the top is an officer's bulletproof vest. 2 years ago, they were $1,149, and now almost $1,500 to buy the same vest. And portable radios, there's the cost. That radio there that you see, the piece on the right that has the coiled wire attached to it, that's the piece that's failing on our current radios that we can't replace. And we didn't have any purchases in 2022, and I wasn't able to get numbers for them. But in 2023, we paid $6,570 for a replacement radio. The new ones right now have gone up. They're $7,628 to buy that piece of equipment that's right there before you. And the CEW on the bottom, $2,300 in 2022. A significant increase in 2023, but again, the model that they were selling, they don't support anymore, so we had to go to the new model, which is the yellow one you see there, the TASER 7. And this year, we moved to a 10-year lease with Axon to provide us with body-worn cameras and the CEWs. And in that 10-year lease, it has a built-in refresh. At 5 years, they replace all the CEWs, and at 3 years, they replace all the body-worn cameras, because historically, we know that after 5 years, the CEWs start to fail, and it's their model. They'll give us the new ones in the lease. Over the course of the 10 years, it's about a $250,000 savings for us, as opposed to just buying the pieces individually as they fail. Also included in the new tasers is a licensing software that is for 5 years is about $1,200 per unit. which is new to us on that. But that is the model now that we can get that is approved for use by officers in Ontario. So it's, again, one of those things. We've tried to find the most efficient way we could to get this equipment for our people, and by moving into the lease over the 10-year period does save us about $250,000 over that span. So, and here's our budget. So just shy of 12.3 million is our total operating and capital budget included. Of that, 11.9 million is just salary and benefits for all our staff, roughly 97%. And then that's not, so then we have 2.1 million that we get back in recoveries, in grants that provide us with our operating funds. So we spend every chance we can. I believe we have 5 grants on the go right now. We're waiting for another one possibly to be released to assist us with some of our mental health mobile crisis team, but we get all of our operating funds basically out of the recoveries that we have from some of our secondments we have and from all the grants that we write. So, but our total ask for our operating budget to the community is 12.288. I'm sure there's
Any questions? Councillor Richardson.
Welcome to the question period. No, I'm just kidding.
Absolutely.
Thank you again, and we do recognize the service that you do provide, and I know that I sit on the OPP new attachment board, and I've seen the level of calls has surged in the last few years as well, and we are dealing with a larger population. Just some hard questions here that I have is, what is the total increase ask this year over last year's budget?
Is the 2,093 is the increase over last year's budget.
Right, and what percentage is that?
I didn't look at a percentage. I can do the math for you. It's probably, I would say it's in the.
It's okay, I think
19,
you can answer that.
I was thinking 20.
19%.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's correct. 19.7 increase of their base budget from last year, or 13.7% of the city's overall pressure of that approximate 15 million.
Thank you. So the total, just a couple questions regarding new positions. Communications supervisor, will that be a big focus on public education? Because I find public education certainly helps when we're, dealing with issues with local residents, because sometimes if they have a better understanding of, what's going on in their community, that it does, decrease calls just based on that education component. Is that going to be a big part of their position?
No, and maybe I should have clarified, that's maybe a little more police talk. Our dispatch center is our communication center, and that position is to supervise the communication center, there are 9 full-time communicators who work in there, as well as part-time staff, and this person will look after whether it's evaluating, scheduling, training, and they'll also be able to, in a time of crisis, be able to get back into the communication center and be able to know how to answer the phones and run the equipment. They'll also do recruiting and all of those types of things. So it's from a communication perspective from the police side, it will be the supervisor of our dispatch center, as opposed to a communication person that maybe with the city you're familiar with from your communications unit. It won't be a public communications person. It's more a dispatch center supervisor, if that.
No, thank you. I appreciate that. And when you're looking at the 4 special constables versus the 2 constables,
yep.
What's the impact when you look at wages between the 2?
The financial impact. So first class, which we call, is an officer who's got 3 years, they've completed their training and they've worked for 3 years on the road. And a first class special constable is about $30,000 to $35,000 difference in their salary. So so for every special constable, we're saving about $30,000 instead of having a police officer do those functions. Instead of just adding 2 more police officers, we can add the two police officers, but instead of adding more police officers to help ease the burden, the special constables can do a lot of that work for them at a reduced rate to the taxpayer. And they can take on some of those administrative duties as well from the officers to assist them, again, with the primary focus of getting the officers out of doing their administrative duties and get them back out onto the streets and into the community.
Councillor Joyce.
And thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you. Actually, Councillor Richardson and yourself answered a few of my questions already. That's good. Yeah, one of the actually questions I had is the administrative duty burden on our police constables is really rising, and I see the same thing being played out with our family doctors, and they're really struggling with this administrative burden. But that was my question: is can these special constables or even a civilian possibly, and I'm sure all services across Ontario are struggling the same way. Is anybody looking at this to alleviate some of this admin burden to, again, get our police officers back out on the road faster? Is there any direction happening there?
Direction, no. Advocacy, yes. It is a regular source of conversation through the Ontario Association of Chiefs of Police and our meetings about just those administrative functions that are being downloaded onto police officers and different ways we can work around it. I don't want to speak for other agencies, but I've heard of some who are backing away from some of these critical pieces of equipment for officers because of that, which I think would be a disservice to the officers. It hasn't happened yet, but it's been discussed. Let's put it that way. But yeah, I think using any way we can alleviate having police officers do these administrative duties is great. And the use of special constables allows them to do a little bit more too, as opposed to hiring someone from our records department to be able to do this. They can't do some of those other functions. They would only be able to do a few of the items, but they still wouldn't take away some of the prisoner monitoring and the scene securities, traffic direction, those types of things where we regularly have to pull an officer out of their patrol duties to do those functions.
So explain a bit more about a special constable. I'm not familiar with, do they still train and carry a gun? Can they do traffic control? Where does...
The Community Safety Policing Act is lays out exactly what the functions they can do. They can do court security, and so they can move the management of people in custody. They can do traffic direction. So if we have a major crash and we have to close down a scene, or even sometimes just for some of the special events we have in the community, they can look after that. They can also go and guard a scene. They would have use of force equipment similar to a police officer's, with the exception of a firearm. They can't carry a firearm, but they are able to. And if the stars all aligned, we could put them out on patrol, and they could ride around and be an extra person out on patrol with an officer as well.
Well, thank you for the quick education there. I do have another question that you may have struggled to answer this, and that's your 144 per 100,000 K average. Do you have any data on that stat for towns that are in the 25 to 30,000 population?
I don't.
Yeah,
I can certainly look into that.
Yeah.
But I know from speaking, just having casual conversation with, we're not the only, I'm sure you can appreciate, we're not the only place that's looking to, or having increasing numbers, just because of some of the things we went through, the pressures that are being put on officers and the amount of administrative tasks that they're doing, just to try and alleviate some of that and get people back out on the streets where we want them.
Thank you. And I'm kind of curious in that stat because in the national and Ontario averages, Toronto and Ottawa and whatnot are in those that can kind of skew things. stunning about the specialized desks. That's quite a desk.
It is, but I would encourage you, if you want to come down and see what they look like, I'd be happy to show you. They are quite a space because they have very large circular monitors. They have phone answering and loggers and all their computers and the screens. I think there's 3 to 4 screens that the dispatchers have to use when they're dispatching right now, because they have with the fire service and the police and all the lines that come in. It shows them all those things. And yeah, it's a sit-stand desk that has the ability to have some comfort features, because when people are in a room together, I'm sure everyone's gone through this, where one is hot and one is cold, and it just needs to, because they are virtually in there for the entire shift other than their lunch breaks. We need them to be as comfortable as possible to be able to function under certainly some high stress situations.
No, just a comment. I think the word desk is the wrong vernacular. I think
Workstation.
Star Trek bridge, I think, is probably more appropriate. And good move on the leasing arrangement with the CEWs and the body-worn cameras. That's
I'd like to take credit for it, but I will give credit to retired Chief Mitchell, because he was very instrumental in getting that put in place before he left. So I'll manage it, but I will give him credit for putting it in place.
Okay, but take your wins where you can get them. Thank you. That's all I have for now.
Councillor Richardson.
Sorry, that just alluded to a couple more questions. So total ask is 8 new positions?
7.
7, okay. I just had 2 for...
2 constables, 4 special constables, and the 2 supervisors are replacing 1 person. So it's only one additional in that area.
Okay, so 7 total.
Yep.
What would be the impact of vehicles needed for these positions?
The only position that needs a vehicle per se would be the police officers. The records manager and the communications or dispatch manager don't require a vehicle. The special constables can utilize vehicles that are at the police service. There are requirements of them to be not be police cars. They would have to look, so they could drive, we have some plain vehicles, they could drive those. And so we don't need to necessarily add anything for them. They can take other vehicles that they could drive. And for the police officers, we have vehicles that are suitable to fill. We've not budgeted any new vehicles for the new positions as for constables. And there was something else on that, but I'll swing back to it. It just slipped my mind for a second.
No, thank you. And we always look at, when you put new positions and what the impacts are going to be to put those positions and make sure that they're being covered with the right materials and equipment as well. The contingency reserve, you said there's nothing left in that reserve. I just tweak when I hear that, because when you're doing long-term financial planning, you want to make sure that you're keeping those reserves, in a state, in a balance. So it was just something that I needed to make a comment on. Thank you.
I have a couple of questions there. We'll get to you in a minute there, Mr. Joyce. A special constable, he's finished school and now he's in the training. How long does it take the special constable to become a constable, and how does that happen?
So how it would happen is they would apply to become a constable when we have an opening, and they go through the same process as anybody else does to become. It's a completely separate process, and then they still have to complete, I believe it's 11 weeks at the Ontario Police College now with some pre-police college training, but they complete the same program as anybody who's off the street gets hired as a police officer.
And the OPP have auxiliary police officers. How come city doesn't have auxiliary officers?
We have 2 currently, and in this, there's no costs per se for salary for auxiliaries, but it is built in. There is some equipment and uniform costs, and that's in our equipment line of our budget. Is we've increased for 2 more people in that unit as well. So we will have more.
Okay, that's good. I didn't realize that you had an auxiliary in there, but that's really good. Another question I have is that when the level of calls have gone up so much, is there any factors, specific factors that are causing these calls to go up? And if there are, is there a plan to try to work on those issues?
I don't know specifically. When I look at our calls for service, so far this year compared to last year, we've laid almost 300 more criminal charges than we did last year at this point already. So we are certainly seeing a lot of time being spent on the administrative of justice charges, if you will. Last year at this time, we executed 316 arrest warrants. This year so far, we're at 501. And those are when people don't show up for court, they get a warrant issued for their arrest, and we have to go arrest them, process them, bring them back. Sometimes somebody's committed offenses and we've sought a warrant for their arrest because we don't know where they are. But those administration of justice charges have gone up significantly since COVID for us, because I'm not sure what the reason is, but now that COVID's gone, people can go back to court, but we're not seeing a large number of our population that are at the courts actually making it back the first time, and they get a warrant issued for their arrest. And our property crimes are up. It's just, overall, we're busier. We're busier in all sections of our organization. Our calls for service and our criminal charges, that all is trending in a higher direction than we have been in the past.
And my last question is if you need vehicles or so on, do you ever approach dealerships or companies to donate vehicles that might help?
In the past, we have, but not for frontline policing vehicles, because they are a specialized vehicle. In the past, we've had community services vehicles donated to us, which we would use for a few years, but when we take the striping and the decal off, the dealership can then take those vehicles and resell them or repurpose them for their function. I'm not sure how many people would really want a Ford Explorer after it's been driven for 3 years, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But it's a specialized vehicle. It has heavier transmission, braking systems, and those types of things. So we were part of what was called the Police Cooperative Purchasing Group. Well, we still are part of it, but those are the prices that we get for those vehicles. And for some of the other items that we get through that purchasing co-op, the dealerships can't even get the items for those prices. So every chance we can get to find an efficiency, we are looking for it, whether it's writing a grant or looking into new initiatives. We're working with the insurance bureaus right now, on leasing plainclothes vehicles at a significantly reduced price. You see around the province, there's announcements about police agencies partnering with insurance agencies to lease plainclothes vehicles, as we call them, non-police marked vehicles that we can use for our detectives or others who aren't wearing uniforms. And we're getting those vehicles at a reduced cost as well. So every chance we can, we're looking for those efficiencies. We have people writing grants regularly to fund current positions, because the grant cycles only run for 2 to 3 years, and then we have to rewrite those grants again, and we are doing that every opportunity.
Councillor Joyce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I missed a question I had here, and another comment too is that slide where you showed the increasing costs from year to year. That really, thank you. That really points to the inflationary pressures that we have as a city, and it goes beyond policing equipment here to our buildings and our roads, and buying asphalt and cement is much higher than the CPI index, and that's just, those two things can put our pressure on all of our departments. The question I missed was you mentioned the FOI requests a couple of times there. It sounds like a big pressure there. You get a lot of FOIs. I'm just curious, is that increasing, and how many you get every year? I'm just curious.
I don't have the stats right in front of me, but it is that role is very busy, because we get requests. If there's a traffic accident that we investigate, the insurance companies want their reports. If there are family court, we get a lot from the family court, because people are having a dispute in family court, and they want all the occurrences that the police have attended to, so that they can bring those reports to court. But what's required in that is the person then has to go through and vet them all. If someone's named in it, they have to contact that person to see if they're okay with their name being released in it or vetted. There's a lot of screening that goes through it. But yeah, motor vehicle collisions, family court, or just if if someone's not happy and they're filing lawsuits, they'll make FOI requests as well.
Thank you for the education.
Okay, thank you. No more questions? Okay, again, thank you and congratulations again for our new chief. And I know you'll do a great job, and to all your staff, and for keeping our community safe. I really appreciate it, and thanks for everybody coming today.
Thank you.
Could I have a motion to adjourn? Councillor Joyce? Oh, sorry, I need a motion to receive the report. Councillor Richardson, second, Councillor Joyce. Now I can go for a motion to adjourn. Councillor Joyce, and seconded by Councillor Richardson. Thank you very much.